All right, we're on Ayin Hey Yoma 75b. And we're discussing the Manna. So I think we're going to back up. I think it's 2 lines we already did, but we're going to back up a bit. The last one on the line is Lechem. It's towards the end of the page. Ayin Hey Yoma 75b. There's a little like Lamed inside of a bracket there, and before that it says Tan Rabbanon. So start with the last word. Tan Rabbanon Lechem. Like the last word on the line is lechem. There's a little lamed inside the brackets there, and then Tan Rabbanon is the last word.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah? Okay. So we're discussing the Manna. And this is something we discussed already last time, but we'll just review where the Gemara is leading. Tan Rabbanon, our sages taught. The verse reads in Tehillim 75, verse 25. Lechem abidim achal ish, man ate the bread of the strong ones. So what does this mean? This is Tehillim referring to the Manna. So what does it mean, eating bread of the strong ones? So the first view is Lechem shemalchei hasharos oichlen osan, that the bread of the Manna was like, or is, the bread that the angels on high would eat. And that's the Manna. The Manna is like akin to the food, or is the food that the angels on high eat. Divrei Rabbi Kiva, these are the words of Rabbi Kiva. And when these words were stated before Rabbi Shmuel, he told them, go tell Akiva. Rabbi Shmuel, I believe, is Rabbi Akiva's student, teacher. So he didn't refer to him by Rabbi Akiva, but referred to him by his first name, Akiva. So Rabbi Shmuel tells him, sends the message, say, tell Akiva, quote, Akiva, Ta'isa, you made a mistake. Do angels eat bread at all? They don't eat bread. So why would you say that the Manna is the bread of the angels? The angels don't eat bread. Here, you want a copy? And therefore, first he proves that the angels don't eat. It states already with respect to the time that Moshe Rabbeinu went up, or Moshe Rabbeinu describing the time he went up to the mountain at Sinai. So he says, Lechem le'echalti, for 40 days and nights, I did not eat bread. She said, I didn't drink water. So Moshe Rabbeinu, when he goes up to the mountain, didn't eat food and drink. Certainly the angels don't. So if that's the case, so what does the verse in Tehillim mean? That the people in the desert ate the bread of avidim, of the strong ones. So Rabbi Shmuel changes the reading. Don't read it avidim, or abidim, which means strong ones. Read it avarim, which means limbs. What does that mean? It explains the Gemara, lechem. The Manna was the kind of bread shenivla, that was absorbed in masayim v'arboim mishmona avarim, in the 248 limbs of the body, without producing any waste, completely and fully absorbed by the body. This is the dispute. Rabbi Kiva states that the Manna is the bread of the angels, and Rabbi Shmuel says angels don't have bread. And the verse means that this is the kind of food that did not produce any waste. We talked about this a little bit last time. That if we're talking about Torah, if Manna is a metaphor, or Manna represents not just the literal Manna, but also the Torah, like all bread represents Torah, all food represents Torah, and the Manna therefore is just like bread from heaven, Torah from heaven, then the dispute would be, Rabbi Kiva might say, the Torah that they were granted is Torah on such a lofty spiritual level. It's the Torah the angels enjoy. And Rabbi Shmuel says, angels don't get Torah. Right? Or, perhaps, since the verse quoted is a verse about Moshe Rabbeinu on the mountain not eating, the Torah of the angels and the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu on the mountain is such that he and the Torah aren't two separate entities, that he has to consume Torah. He's so one with it, there's not even food and drink. Right? Because food and drink, which sustains me and becomes one with me, right? As I absorb the food, it becomes one with my body, right? Which is why Torah is a metaphor for food. Because I take Torah into my mind, and if I process it, it becomes part of the way I think. In the way food, after process, becomes part of the body, right? That's why Torah is a symbol for food, or food is a symbol for Torah, whereas clothing is for mitzvahs. This is in Tanya chapter 4 and 5. Mitzvahs are like clothing because you engage in them, you put them on. They don't go into you. Same with clothing, you put them on. Whereas Torah is something you take into you. It goes into your mind, You digest it, you think about it, because part of the way you think, like food, which you take into your body, digest it, and it becomes part of your physical body. So if that's the case, then perhaps the idea of the angels not eating bread means they are so one with Torah they don't need to ingest it and then become one with it. Right? Because food, there's still a separation between me and the food. There's me and the food, and I ingest it. So there's me, Torah, and I ingest it. Whereas in heaven, it's so clear and obvious. It's the only reality. It's just, there is no distinction. There's no separation between the angel studying the Torah and the Torah itself. Maybe. Following? In that sense, he went on to explain Rabbi Shmuel's view, which says that the manna is such that it did not produce any waste, fully absorbed in the body. He explained that waste is like klipa. It's a sense of separation. Right? The part of the food that does not become one with me is what is produced in waste. Right? So likewise, there's some part of Torah as a human being, and there's a sense of selfishness and ego. That's the waste part of the Torah study. When I study Torah, it's very difficult to completely divest myself of the sense of I. I'm a human being. I enjoy it. There's still a sense of me. There's a sense of klipa. There's a sense of separation between me and Hashem. As much as I'm trying to absorb the Torah to become part of who I am, part of the way I think, there's still a sense of me. I can't escape being me. Right? I can't escape feeling a sense of independence and a sense of self. I can try my best to surrender the self to the best of my ability and try to let go of my ego as much as I can so that I can absorb Torah more purely. But to some degree or another, there's going to be some waste. There's going to be some little bit of ego. Whereas in the desert, there's no waste, no klipa. All of Torah is completely absorbed in all 248 limbs, leaving no sense of ego separating the person from the one studying. Clear? We talked about this last time. Okay. Now the Gemara says like this: Elamani mekayim. So what do I do now? Elamani mekayim. What do I do now? What the verse reads: V'yesed tia lacha ala znecha v'yitzas Hashem achutz. This is a verse. Where's the? Here it is. It's in Devarim, chapter 23, verse 13 and 14. And there, the verse essentially tells us that we should have shovels ready and places ready so that a person can travel out of the camp and go to the bathroom and relieve oneself. If that's the case, that means Jews produce waste. They have a commandment to keep the camp clean by going out and relieving themselves out of the camp, outside of the encampment of the Jews, and to have shovels there ready to bury it for keep sanitation. So this would indicate that Jews did produce waste. So how is Rabbi Shmuel saying that the manna is such that it didn't produce any waste?
Says it in the Chumash also.
That's right. This is a quote from the Chumash. The Gemara is quoting the Chumash, which, by the way, this idea of Jews going out of the camp to relieve themselves is it's almost prophetic. I mean, obviously it is, it's from Hashem, but it's in the sense that it took most of civilization thousands of years to realize that the fact that they were relieving themselves in their own yards and they were relieving themselves in their own encampment is what's killing them. Historically speaking, during wars, it wasn't uncommon that more soldiers died from dysentery and all kinds of other infections that went around the camp wild more than during the actual battles. People are eating, sleeping, and relieving themselves all in the same place. And they're in war, they're on the floor, they're dirty, they're this, they're that, and they're constantly getting diseases. And Jewish people were spared all of this by going out of the camp and relieving themselves there. And a very similar thing with respect to washing our hands, going to mikveh. Every time we ate, we were washing our hands. Right? Modern time, now it's normal. Of course you wash your hands before you eat. That wasn't the norm. All kinds of things like that. And throughout history, I hope this is not going to be the case now, but throughout history, plagues didn't fare well for Jews. Not because plagues would attack Jews more, but because anti-Semites blamed the Jews for the plague and then they were killed after. During the Black Plague, more Jews died as opposed to riots and pogroms after the Black Plague than during the Black Plague itself. For that reason, because they looked at the Jews and said, "You guys are dying at less proportion. It must be your fault that this whole thing is happening."
So where does he come up with this leaving themselves outside the camp?
The verse from the Chumash.
But the Chumash says they never did. There was no waste.
The Chumash is quoting from this Gemara. The Chumash is, look at the Chumash we have in Shul here. Yeah, they're incorporating the Gemara here, but the Gemara is trying to get to the conclusion because the Chumash also tells us that God commanded them to relieve themselves outside the camp. So it seems to be a contradiction. On the one hand, the food is absorbed and there's not producing any waste. On the other hand, they're told to go to the bathroom outside. So how do we reconcile this contradiction? Sorry?
So which is the truth?
That's the Gemara's question. How do we reconcile the story? So it says the Gemara like this, in answering the question. Dvarim shetagre umas ha'olam moichin oisam. And this sheds a whole light on the story. Waste the Jews produced was the result of food they bought from travelers. So you have to think about this. There's a whole entire nation, something like 2 million people, marched out of Egypt, extremely wealthy. They depleted Egypt of all their wealth. These guys got gold, silver, cattle, everything. They're marching in the desert. They're marching for a long time, even though they don't have to be. They're marching a long time because God decreed that they should be marching in the desert for a long time. But how long is the walk from Egypt to Israel? 2 weeks. I don't know. Let's say it takes longer time with 2 million people. It's 2 months, not 40 years.
Took us 6 hours by car.
6 hours by car. So how long do you think it takes by walking? Let's say it takes 2 months. I don't know. Probably less than that. Doesn't take that long. But Hashem made them wander the desert, right? My point is that there are nations all over that know that there's great business opportunity here. There's millions of people with tons of money. Let's go there and sell them stuff, which explains how they had a lot of the material they needed in the desert for the Mishkan. There's all kinds of things they needed. Not just the gold and silver and the wood to build it, right? Rashi says that the cedar, they brought it with them because they brought it with them. Yaakov planted it, and the gold and silver, I guess, they had from Egypt, from depleting Egypt. But there's all kinds of spices and oils they need in the desert and to do the service in the temple. So they bought the stuff. They bought it from these people, which adds a whole other layer to their complaining. Besides for getting free manna and slav and all the wealth that they had in the desert, they could do business like anybody else and buy stuff like anybody else, and they still complained. And that's how far this goes. You understand a little better every time Hashem gets upset when they're complaining. It's like, stop it already. What are you missing already? You know, the manna doesn't taste like watermelon. Go buy watermelon from the guy who comes to sell it, you know. They complained. But from here, from the Gemara, it's clear that they actually bought things, and that's where the waste is produced. Not from the manna, but from the stuff they bought from from the merchants who would come to sell stuff to them. It sheds a whole new light into the story. This little line here.
So why didn't they buy water from the merchants instead of complaining?
That's a good point. Why didn't they buy water from the merchants? I imagine
They must have traveled with a lot of water.
that water is probably the most expensive of the items the merchants would be selling. You have to schlep water into the desert. It's heavy. It's very heavy. You have to schlep water. You know, that's right. Bringing poultry or meat is not as difficult as bringing water. You bring a couple of living chickens, you kill them and sell them.
If I could sell water in the desert, I'd bring it.
That's right. So maybe that's why. Well, you're right, but you're right. At the end of the day, the fact that they complained is further compound the nerve they had to complain is further compounded by the fact that they could actually buy things in the desert. It wasn't like they were stuck there and couldn't conduct business. Sorry? The chutzpah, yeah. It adds a whole other layer. That's the Gemara says here. That the stuff that they bought from the nations of the world, that's what caused the waste. Now, if we're going to talk about this spiritually speaking, the manna represents Torah, food represents Torah, and that doesn't produce waste. Because their Torah was so pure that it absorbed everything and there's no ego in their Torah study. So where does their ego come from? Not from inside. Their ego came from interacting with the nations of the world around them, the negative influence, as it were, of the nations of the world coming to sell things to them, that's where the waste comes from. That's where the ego comes from. If we're going to take it on the spiritual meaning. I want you to explain the following. Rabbi Lezer ben Parta, Lezer son of Parta says, Omer, even the things they bought from the nations of the world, from the merchants, Mon Mafrigon, the Mon protected them. So they didn't even have produced waste from that either, according to this opinion. Which means their connection to Hashem, to Torah, was so great that even the nations of the world didn't have any negative effect on them. No ego even from there. So if that's the case, why do they need to go to the bathroom? According to Rabbi Shmuel, the food was absorbed in their bodies, the manna was absorbed in their bodies, but the food they bought from the merchants produced waste. According to Rabbi Lezer ben Parta, the food that they got from the merchants, they need to produce waste because the manna protected them. Their connection to Hashem was so deep through the manna, through the Torah they're learning, that even their influence, the food they're acquiring from the merchants, aren't producing waste. If that's the case, why are they told to go to the bathroom outside the camp? So says Rabbi Lezer, only after they complained. Once they complained about the manna, then they lost that spiritual energy. And then they started to produce waste. Which would make sense. The whole notion of complaining is a sense of ego. If waste represents ego, then the moment they complain, waste is produced. Because they've already, reclaimed their ego by complaining. I want it this way, I want it that way, I want it this way, I have melon, I have garlic. So now that they complained, now the waste is back. That's this view. And this is how he explains it. Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God says, because they complained, Ani Amarti, I was hoping, I said, you kamalach esharis, they'll be like angels. They're going to be one with me. Perfect unity. Manna, no waste. They're going to be perfect like angels. But achshav, but now, they're complaining. They're not ready for this angel type relationship. They still have their sense of ego. So I'm going to bother them. Shalosh parsais, that they have to travel 3 parsa. Parsa is a distance, measuring distance, about 1 kilometer. So I'm going to make them go 3 parsas. How do we know it's 3 parsas? Because the verse reads like this. They camped at the Jordan from a place called Beis HaYishimis until a place called Eval Shittim. This is the description of the verse describing where they camped at the Jordan River. This verse is in Bamidbar. Rabbi son of Barchana says, I went and traveled there. I saw this place. I saw Beis HaYishimis at the Jordan. I saw this place called Eval Shittim. This place where the Torah describes they camped at the Jordan. I saw it. Plus a parsa, and it was 3 parsa. Now, 1 second. If the camp is 3 parsa, who says the Jews have to walk 3 parsa? If I'm at the front of the camp, all I have to walk is 2 feet and walk out of the camp to go to the bathroom. So how do I know they have to walk 3 parsa? Let's explain the Gemara like this. The Tana we were taught, Keshe Nifnin, when the Jews would go relieve themselves in the desert, Nifnin, they would not relieve themselves, Lo Lefneim, not in front of the camp, meaning westward, right? I think forward, I think forward is westward, going towards Israel. I assume that's the front, I believe. And not to the sides, north and the south. They go to the back, they go to the east. Why? Because they didn't know where the clouds of glory would take them, right? As soon as the clouds of glory raise up, it means they have to walk, right? So they had no idea which direction they were going to go any moment. So they're going to the bathroom. Let's say they went in some direction, and all of a sudden the Jews start walking that direction. That's not very pleasant. So after they go to the one direction, they know that the clouds of glory aren't going to take them. And that's backwards. So they knew the clouds of glory, Hashem would take them either forward or to one or two of the sides, not back. So whenever they would go to the bathroom, they'd go to the back, which means if I lived in the front of the camp, if I lived all the way in the front, let's say the front is the west, right? And I had to go to the bathroom, I would have to walk the entire camp to the other end. And there we have the conclusion that God says, I'm making them walk 3 parsa. At least for those guys walking 3 parsa to get out of the camp to finally go to the bathroom. Now, just to add an interesting thing, the number 3 is significant here. In Kabbalah and Chassidus, we knew there are 4 layers of klippa, 4 levels of klippa. The top one, the first one, the highest of them, is called klippat noga, which is the klippa that has potential for holiness. That's like most of the physical materials in this world. Take this table. It's not holy. It's not godly in and of itself. It's klippa. Why is it klippa? It's klippa because you look at it, you don't see godliness. You see a table, and anything, like you said before, anything that's a sense of I, a sense of ego, separate, anything that isn't transparently connected to Hashem is klippa. So you look at the table, it's klippa. Because it doesn't say, I am created by God. That's not what it tells you when you look at it. It just says, I'm here. But it's not completely irredeemable. We can make a nice table out of it, put it into a shul, people can daven it. Now it's serving Hashem. So it's most of the world is in the category of klippas noga, in that it has the capacity for elevation, if done the right way. A piece of leather can become a pair of tefillin. A glass of water, a person can make a bracha and drink it with the intention of serving Hashem later, to give him energy to serve and learn. Right? So most of the world is in that level of klippa where it's elevated. So that wouldn't be the kind of klippa that we would refer to as waste. Waste is the kind of klippa that you have to let go of. You have to get rid of it. This is the kind of klippa that you can absorb and elevate. But then the Kabbalah identifies 3 other layers of klippa. They're actually known as like one level called the 3 levels of impurity. Shalish klippas atzmeis. The 3 levels of impurity. These are the kinds of things that cannot be elevated, such as non-kosher food. Non-kosher food cannot be elevated. That's why it's not kosher, because you cannot elevate it and use it for Hashem. So don't eat it. That's like the waste type of klippa. Push it out. And here we're told that to let go of their waste, they have to walk 3 parsa. Perhaps symbolic of these 3 levels of klippa that have to be pushed out. The non-kosher stuff, as opposed to most klippa in the world, which is not unkosher, but not holy, which you are supposed to engage in, but engage it in a holy way so you can elevate it. So maybe when it comes to the waste, it describes 3 parsa going outward, perhaps. And now the Gemara says like this, in kind of addressing our issue here of how they complained. It's so perfect. This was their complaint. The Gemara quotes the verse in Bamidbar, which reads, "Va'atam nafshini yevesha." Now our souls are dried out. Ein koil, we have nothing. And the verse goes on to say, except for this manna. We have nothing except for this manna. Now, the Gemara doesn't ask this question explicitly, but it would seem that the Gemara's question is, what do you mean they have nothing else? You just finished telling me that they bought stuff from merchants. So what's the verse? Why is the Jews complaining they have nothing else? They have plenty, go buy. There's merchants coming, selling everything you want. So perhaps, this would explain the Gemara's answer like this. Amnu, the Jews complained, Asid man zeh, this man is going to, shetifik me'ayim, it's going to explode in our stomachs. It's going to kill us. Why? Klum yesh yoludisha. Is there ever such a thing as a person born to a woman, meaning a human being? Shemachnes, that takes in, ve'enim moitzi, and doesn't produce? How could there be such a thing? How is it physically possible to eat something and not produce waste? And that's what they complained about. That was the source of their complaint. That's the way the Gemara interprets it here. They were scared of this manna business. They turned to Moshe and like, this manna is off. We're all eating it, nothing's coming out. This is strange. This is how are we going to survive? This is for sure going to kill us. And, sorry?
No faith.
No faith. But if we're taking this on the spiritual level, that this is talking about Torah with no ego, perhaps the complaint to Moshe is, this is a level we're not ready for. You can't do this. You can't expect us to completely have no sense of self. We just can't do it. And this would make sense. This would make sense. You can't expect us to live our lives. We're human beings. Why did Hashem choose us and not angels? God says I wanted them to be like angels, where they can eat produce no waste. They can be perfect, no egos. But why did Hashem choose us and not angels? We know the story. Moshe Rabbeinu tells the angels, you guys don't have a Yetzer Hara. Moshe Rabbeinu basically telling them, you guys are perfect. Torah is not meant for perfect people. Torah is meant for people who struggle. We struggle. We get Torah. And perhaps that's what the Jews are saying. You're trying to turn us into angels. That's not who we are. That's not why you chose us. We're human beings. We produce waste. We have ego. That's just who we are. And you can't, jam us into this level of being like angels with no waste, no ego, all perfect. We're just not like that. So now their complaint has a little bit more meaning to it. It's not just the complaining for the sake of complaining. There's a tug of war here between like the expectation, as it were, Hashem has that that's going to be perfect, and the Jews saying, "Look, we're human beings. You chose us because we're not perfect. You can't expect us to remain perfect, to eat Torah with no waste, to have Torah with no ego, perfect like angels. We can't do it." So now there's a little bit of we're getting more meaning to why and how they're complaining and what the context in which they're complaining is. This is again, the literal Gemara is they just complained that how they were scared they're going to blow up and die. I'm just suggesting a deeper explanation to what this all means.
This guy Stephen Hawking once said the two biggest wastes of time is filling your car up with gas and relieving yourself.
I can think of others. Okay, tomorrow begins a new section, God willing, further discussing the Manna as it relates to Moshe Rabbeinu, as it relates to Joshua, and their relationship with the people. So more interesting stuff coming on the Manna, God willing, tomorrow. Have a good day.